Welcome, listeners, back to HTO Football with myself, Andrew Timbrell, and my partner in crime, as always, Tom Whitford. How are you doing this week, Tom?
Very well, very well. I think that it's getting brighter outside. It's that permanent piece when you go, when it's bright at 4 p.m, you're like, summer's coming. So we're nearly there. And obviously very excited about this evening's episode. It's sort of a favourite back on the pod. And we're expanding a little bit again, as we know. We're in the midst of our HTO Film Series. And joining us this evening are Ben and Gabe Turner from Fullwell 73. Obviously, Ben's joining us for his second cap on the programme. So, do you know, I mean, pretty much a veteran now. But the fans loved him. Yeah, everyone was listening, so we had to get them back on. How are you both? Are you well?
Yeah, really well, thanks.
Great. Very glad to be on, making my debut.
I was going to say, yeah, how are the nerves, Gabe?
No, I am nervous, actually. I saw what Ben did last time and what kind of numbers he drove. And, I feel like I've got a lot to live up to here.
Obviously, I'm pretty nervous. I haven't socialised with this many people for years.
Well, literally about that. Little bit of background then for the, obviously most of the repeat drive listeners, everyone will be knowing who you are without question. But for those few, that 1% who don't know who you both are, it'd be great if one of you could just pick up and just give us a little background to you both and Fullwell 73.
Well, we're two brothers who make documentaries together, part of a bigger team of people at Fullwell 73 with our eldest friend's cousin and James Corden. We run Fullwell 73 and we make a variety of different kind of content, but I guess our first passion and our first project was in sport. We made a film called In the Hands of the Gods when we'd just come out of uni, and then from there, really, we've always retained a kind of core of the business, making sports documentaries. So we make entertainment shows and music videos and adverts and films and scripted and non-scripted. But I think through the core of our business has always been a desire, specifically from me and Ben as directors, to make sports documentaries. And we've been massively lucky to have worked with incredible people and had incredible opportunities. So it's our passion. We love it. So.
I was going to say that is that what it started? Did you love sport and then go, do you know what? I want to do something in sport, and maybe you're not blessed as athletes yourselves, so you go, do you know what? Let's talk. I don't know. You might be those skills behind those eyes. I
told you putting a big tackle early, Gabe, on your debut. I said, come out there, clatter into him, Gabe. You know what I mean? You got to.
I won the Anthony Rose Football Award at school. And if you haven't heard of the Anthony Rose Football Award, then I don't know what you're doing on this podcast.
It's Kaiser Sose, mate. It's one of those things that is out there, but it's not known, it's not tangible. But is that where it came from? Did you say, we love sport, we want to stay in that industry, but, or was it actually film first, media first, and actually then you sort of said, actually, let's tune that to a passion of ours, which is sport?
I think when you speak to filmmakers, they'll be like, when we were kids, we were filming each other and making He-Man movies and stuff like that. We were just playing sport all the time, not whatever level against each other with our mates, whatever. So we did that, whatever that deep education for other people on film was. I guess we did it with sport. And so when I remember when we were talking about, like, when we did the Class 92, we were talking to each other about what research to do, but we watched every game in it. And we've been so immersed in it when it had happened that we kind of and I think that helped us make a better film. And I don't know which way round it was, but I definitely think that lifelong obsession that we've had, you see it in people's work. They do their best stuff about things they've been obsessed by, and we've always been obsessed by sport. So I don't know which way round it was, but I think if it didn't make us go into it in the first place, it certainly dictated that the things that we would do well would kind of be around that area, I think.
Yeah, I think we were always trying to explain why we were so obsessed with sport. And
if you're Sunderland.
Yeah, and if you're trying to explain to someone why sport matters, you get quite lyrical about sport, right? Whether in whatever format you're trying to do that. But if you're trying to explain to someone why it matters at the weekend to spend 4 hours driving there, or 5 hours driving there, 5 hours driving back on your Saturday to go and see Sunderland, and let's say you have a girlfriend, and they're like, can we hang out on Saturday? And you're like, I've kind of got to leave at 7 a.m. and I won't be back till 2 a.m. And they're like, what could possibly be driving you towards doing that? And you're like, well, it's football, and that's not going to cut it. You've got to explain why football matters, right? So I think we've spent our lives trying to explain why we have to be in certain places at certain times, watching certain events. and because of that, we've grown accustomed to putting the kind of trying to get that magic across. And so Ben is far more cultured than I am. I was someone at school who was asked by my teachers to write about something else in creative writing other than football, or to do something other than sport. That was really what got me through school. So for me, it was the filmmaking came after the passion for sport, and that was just a way of articulating what I cared about. Whereas Ben is a far more well-educated and artistic human being.
There are various moments that are highlights in your career, and like one of the highlights for us, they've been around sport, making something about Sunderland, but like when we made Sporting Nation, getting to work with the journalists like Alison Rudd and Jonathan Freeland and Jonathan Liu and these kind of like sports journalists was like, for them to accept us as collaborators and make a show with us felt to us like, I think, what a lot of like people would feel about working with like the other directors or producers in the industry, which I don't take for granted, and I would be, and there's plenty of people I'm bowled over in that sphere and would love to work with in that sphere, but that was like a real thing for us, and we made it with them, and they were like, they spoke to us about like how we thought about sport, because they really thought about it too. It was like,
and like I remember like the most starstruck, we literally worked with some massive names, right? The most starstruck we ever were was we did a documentary on Laurie Cunningham for ITV, and Cyril Regis came to my house because it was like a shoestring budget, and we interviewed him in my garden. I had like a little flat, and there was a little like square concrete bit which was a garden, and it was like a sort of brick wall behind him. We thought, it'd be quite good to shoot in there. And when Cyril came over to my house, me and Ben buzzed out. Like, we were like, Cyril Regis is in. This is insane. And like, you know, like at that period of time, we were doing music videos for One Direction out in California. So we were doing quite high level work, but like just to roll with Cyril for a day, we were just like absolutely buzzed out.
Cyril, yeah. Was there a sports documentary / film that growing up grabbed your attention and was like, wow, like that's amazing?
Yeah. Cool. It's great. It's goals from Charlton, 100 greatest goals from Charlton to Maradona.
On film, we watched it every single day.
It does the World Cups from 66 to 86, and it weaves a narrative according to the countries, right? So you go from like Holland in like 74 to Holland in 78, and then you get the Germans, and you like, it's really like, it's a masterpiece.
that was when we were kids though. But then like growing up, like When We Were Kings was massive for us when we saw that. Dogtown the Z Boys was massive for us when we saw that.
Even like Raging Bull was like, just seeing a film that was like, you know, as a sports film.
I'm trying to think. There were a couple of really influential ones. I remember When We Were Kings, both of us being like, that was.
That's how you make sports.
Yeah, that was like, and I think we also when we started out, documentaries were like really exciting. You know, like Stacey Peralta directed Dogtown the Z Boys, hadn't directed a film. He was a skater, and he was just like, and you didn't feel like you had to be qualified in filmmaking to make a film. You just had to have a perspective or a sort of unique angle. And so I think that film really inspired me to want to do it.
Came out at that time, and Spellbound came out at that time, and suddenly like feature docs were a bit of a thing, and they could.
And actually, just going back to 98, when I was still in school, my last year of school, 97, sorry, Living with the Lions. I loved that movie. I mean, I was obsessed. I went on tour to South Africa with my school playing rugby. We watched that film on the bus to and from games. You know, like we'd be hyped up thinking we were going to go and then get beaten shitless by some South Africans. But like in the coach on the way there, we'd be watching the film. So I think it was always like we were always switched onto it. Always loved watching it. Always. But then like me and Ben were talking the other day about like the Usain Bolt thing. That was so special because I remember we had this tiny little white TV, and like you remember in the olden days, TVs were tiny. Like even big TVs were tiny.
I wouldn't know, Gabe.
You wouldn't know. In the olden days, TVs were tiny. And I remember in 92 with Linford, crouched round. We had this little white telly. And I remember being crouched around that telly with Ben, watching 100 metres. And we would talk about why we were so nervous for 100 metres. You couldn't explain, but because it was so quick, somehow you could watch a football game and you'd care more, but you'd be less nervous because it was 90 minutes, stuff can happen, you know, you kind of, whereas in a 100-metre sprint, even if you're only a tiny bit invested,
you don't breathe.
Humping, right? And I remember watching Linford with Ben, and like we were beside ourselves, like anxious. And then when he won, like buzzing, the two of us celebrating Linford. And I remember we were stood on the finish line with Bolt, having spent a year and a half following him on the finish line. We looked at each other and we were like, how is this our job? Like, how is this what we are being paid to do? We're stood here. We would have, in 92, if I'd have said to you, this was our thing, this was the two of you going to be on the line, following the quickest man to ever do it, making a film about his life, right? In the stadium, there's just no way. So I think, I guess that passion, that as fans and just people who love sport, that's probably what led up. I don't know, Ben, I would probably say that was first and then filmmaking was second.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Ben's slightly different because he trained as an editor and he was much more in that zone before this all exploded. I was still at uni.
Is that still your, Ben? Is that still the biggest sort of joy you take from the job?
I think a lot of what I do is founded on that. You know what I mean? Like a lot, especially what I do at the moment, with like executing shows and stuff like that. But I love being in a dark room editing all night, and I love being in a dark room editing all night with Gabe. It's like it's a joy. It's one of our great joys.
That's where we're at our best. If it's just me and him and an editor sat in a room, that's where we're at our best. But you can't underestimate the moments when you're like, if you're filming Usain Bolt, being in the stadium watching him win the 100 meters is like no edit compares to that. But in terms of like where we are the most confident,
that's where we do our thing. That's where we do.
That's where we do our thing.
We will go into some more details around filmmaking. That's what we've sort of coined the series in this episode to be. But I got to ask, what was he like? What was Usain Bolt like? How did you get him? You know, he must be like, the character that he is, the superstar that he was, even by that point. How does that even happen?
Getting him was easy because he loved Man United. So Class 92 sold him like in an instant. That bit wasn't what I was thinking. The thing that I've got is it maybe that was kind of interesting to us, that he is who you think he is. He is that, and he's like one of the most true to who you think he is, to who he is, of people I've ever met before. That just is, and he's like, you could basically take him at face value, and that's what I would basically say is a good thing with who he is. What was kind of interesting for us, I think, in that film, from a sporting perspective, I never really understood the 100 meters like I do now. Before I learned to understand it. When we watched that final at the Olympics, it didn't feel like 10 seconds. It felt like I could see, like I was really inside it. And we learned what the different phases were and where he was fallible. And I understood that in a way. Like basically my experience of making loads of stuff in football, slightly disappointingly, is not put me off football. But I don't think we were so heartbroken at the end of Sunderland. When we sat at Wembley after that second playoff loss, I don't know if I haven't felt so low since I was a kid about like sport and football. You don't let yourself get into it in that same way. We were so invested in so many ways, and just seeing the inside of the club. I still love Sunderland as much, but like football, it didn't make football bloom in the way that like being with Usain for a few years and watching him train and being a part of that and seeing it was like an absolute, as a sporting experience, was just like that. It was just mind blowing, and crowning and watching him actually come through and do it. But like you really got into like the minutiae. It was wicked.
So this is obviously about 4 or 5 years ago. Usain Bolt comes out, guys, and then you've got since there's been like Netflix has obviously sort of boomed the whole industry, hasn't it? Is there a combination of factors here why the industry is just blossoming at the moment? You've got things like subscription services. You've got
it's a perfect
COVID down, I suppose, is making fans want to have more access than ever before.
Got a global pandemic, so everyone's sitting on their arse. To be frank,
But it's a perfect. I think it goes back into like there's a thing that podcasting, long form journalism, drama box sets. There's a thing that is about like the way you tell stories, right? It's like slower, episodic. It's more like a feature film is like trying like a short film to a series being like a novel, and we're all in different ways. Like with a podcast, we can look at something in a different kind of way. And I think that like the sports series, sport lends itself very well to that because constantly drama is coming to a head. Your main characters are very evidently succeeding or failing on a regular basis. So if you're following a sports team in a season, there's like 50, 60 opportunities in a very binary way for your characters to succeed. So it's really good for making stories like that. So it suits this moment, but it's part of a much bigger picture. And yeah, pandemic definitely helps for sports docs right now because we're all missing it, and we're all really sentimental. And our films definitely are quite sentimental.
Well, it's also I think sports docs, like right now with content, I find you want to be sort of inspired, uplifted. You know, you don't want to be carrying weight at the end of the night. Like, it's hard enough getting through the day. The last thing you want to do is like tuck into a drama that's gonna like make you feel worse. And sport, because of the drama of sport and the characters in sport and their successes and the drama of the moments, generally leaves you feeling quite uplifted. So for anything, if you look at the breadth of the stuff out there, like the other night I watched the Stefan Marbury one on Netflix. Just a great watch, you know, made me feel good, like it was interesting. Watch that, you know, it's sort of a fascinating character. You watch the highs, the lows, you get the full breadth of drama. You go home thinking, wow, this kid came from nowhere, smashed it, you know. So there's kind of like, it kind of is the perfect tonic for what we're going through right now to consume. Yeah. And then obviously, you know, the Tiger doc that just dropped, as we were just talking about before, and you know, they're just amazing characters in sport that have done incredible things. So it just feels like a really sort of pleasant way to bring an evening together right now when you're searching for things to do, you know. But you know, we've been super lucky because when we started, it just started, as Ben said, that documentaries just started bubbling, and you could just tell stories in the way that you felt that was right, and there didn't feel like there was a set formula on how to express yourself or get your story across. So then we made In the Hands of the Gods, and then from there, I mean, really, what gave us the big kick was Beckham. We'd done a sketch with Beckham for Comic Relief with James. And when the Class 92 project came, Beckham basically said, these are the guys, I've worked with them, I trust them. And then so we made Class 92, and because he'd given us that stamp, if you're in the world of sport and you're Usain Bolt, if your agent goes, oh, by the way, these guys have just been working with David Beckham, Usain Bolt goes, all right, cool, yeah, I can trust them.
All comes back to David Beckham. Outrageous, everything. I think everything comes back to him, doesn't it? It's the Mecca.
All roads lead to Becks.
Yeah. He basically vouched for it, you know, he vouched for it. If Beckham vouches for you, you're
golden.
In the sporting world, you're like, all right. And that's what he did. He wanted us to do Class 92, and then he vouched for us basically if anyone would say, oh, you know, these guys to be trusted, you know, they're out for the right reasons to make the right kind of films. He would go, yeah, they are. And this is my boy's just come in, he's hiding behind. So.
I was going to say, what advice, Ben, would you give a young upcoming sports filmmaker about the balance between sort of entertaining an audience and a viewer and also making it informative and as transparent as possible at the same time?
I think the balance in our shows are much more towards entertainment. I think keeping people engaged and telling a story from like the perspective of the people. I think it'd be quite right for us to call ourselves journalists, me and Gabe, because I don't think we're going after a story in that kind of a way. I think we try and borrow the style that we kind of, our ambitions are towards telling stories in a dramatic way and borrowing from that kind of scripted side of things. So like, and so for me, I'm all, but when I'm looking at a cut or I'm talking to someone, I'm always like, what is your audience member asking at this point in time? What's driving them into the next thing? What's the dramatic question that's taking you forward? Because you can just like wave a camera around for hours anywhere, you know, and tell a million stories out of it. And sometimes it's some of these sports docs, it's so amazing to be with these people that's kind of a bit dazzling, and you don't necessarily, you can put that on screen without really telling a story in a way. But if it's going to be any good, it's like what's propelling your viewer forward in the story to see what's going to happen next. So that's definitely an entertainment thing. That's not necessarily like fully journalistic. I don't see us making a documentary where we do a big expose or something. That's not quite our life. I mean, sometimes it can come your way if you're in the middle of one story and then you just tell the honest story, but that's not generally our sort of thing.
Yeah, so like the expose sort of style was. Have you seen Icarus?
Yeah.
That was very that shot up straight away when you said that.
Yeah, totally. And if that happens, you've got to follow it. I definitely believe in story integrity. It's got to be true and honest and so faithfully. But
we had an experience like that though. We were doing Ryan Giggs' last season at United, right, as a sort of farewell for ITV, and then he took over. So we'd shot for months, and then we just went, part of that, he's now the manager, and it was the 6 weeks or so that he was manager of Man United, and that was the film. So like Ben's right, you just got to, like we always say, like you put, Ben, you might have said this, but I was just dealing with the kids. But we always say you put a treatment together, and then the treatment is your worst case scenario for what the film is. The best case scenario is that the protagonist goes, no, that's not what it is. Everything you've looked up on Wikipedia or anywhere else, that's not the story. This is the story, and they take you through it. And sometimes that's a change of circumstance, but other times that's just a case of like you don't really know who the person is until you sat and chatted with them and properly spent time with them.
Does that annoy you, excite you? We were speaking to, the creators of Notorious, the Conor McGregor, and he said, look, again, similar story in terms of he was following him for years. It wasn't like a retrospective look at an event that's already happened. So therefore, he didn't have an idea of what was going to happen. He didn't want to retell a story. He didn't want to just delve into nostalgia. But actually he said it's bloody frustrating because, like you said, a lot of it just ends up on the floor because it just, the career goes in a different way. But does that excite you, or actually is it just a nightmare film?
I love it. I love it. I love it, and I think a lot of that comes maybe with experience. In that, like the first film we shot so much stuff, and then learned very quickly that the beauty is there are very few moments that are really authentic and true, and that's your film. And you learn really quickly that you don't need to overshoot. You don't need to just like you can kind of. I think there's something really beautiful about like knowing the great thing, for whatever reason. It's very rarely to do with you being great when you discover the great thing, but being able to sort of put your ego away and forget the fact that it's about you and just be in the story and see a magical moment and know that's going to connect and know that everything you've planned goes out the window. For me, I love that, but I think I would have loved that.
I think we've taken that into the other parts of our filmmaking. When we're shooting scripted, we're constantly like trying to let it be in that kind of way, let it be the sum of its parts rather than like be too kind of forcing on it. So, yeah,
I always say that like in scripted, it's really nice that you know that it's a Guy Ritchie film, you know it's a Martin Scorsese film. I think in documentaries, you shouldn't know who directed it. But I fundamentally think that like you shouldn't be able to say he did that, because it's not about you in any way, shape or form. No one wants your take on someone.
Well, your take there implicitly anyway. You know what I mean? You're making so many choices through the film of what to shoot, what not to shoot, how to cut it. Your imprint is there, whatever. You don't need to sort of force yourself in the frame for it, for it to be. It's through it's through your eyes anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was one of the questions I was going to ask actually, is that are there things on the checklist that you try and have a not in a forceful way at all, but by nature, it ends up being a very Gabe.
It always ends up being a group of mates who change the world. Whether that be Usain Bolt, who's in a single sport, we end up the coach, his manager NJ. We end up creating that group of people that come together to do. So then we went and did a music doc about Motown, and it ended up being Smokey and Berry and all of the. You know what I mean? So we are attracted to that, and I think we do end up going down that route. That is an ingredient for us. So it kind of goes against what I was saying. But I guess
that's what's exciting about it. The work like allows you to discover what you're interested in. If you let it become, somehow if you're too fussy about it and try and force it down a path, it's not as kind of fulfilling, or as you don't learn as much as if you kind of like try and kindle the fire and let it be the best form of its own story. You then find out what you're interested in anyway.
But I think less thematic, more just like how you make the film. Like I feel like when we made Usain Bolt, we tried to make it a Usain Bolt film. So from the music and the speed of the editing and everything about the structure of that film, we wanted it to feel like it came from him. That then when we did the Class 92, the music, the cutting, the style, we wanted it to feel like it was an authentic slice of them. So the two films are structured differently. There's different music. It's cut different. And I think that's what I mean, is that when we go into the film, we try and make it feel stylistically like it's an authentic piece of them. And that
is that a little
requires
bit? Is that a little bit why the entourage around Bolt, not his own personal entourage, but I mean the show as well? I Am Bolt. There's snippets in there from all sorts, isn't there? Name the superstars, and is that also reflecting the superstar that Bolt is versus some lads from Manchester?
Yeah, I think what I mean about that is there was some sequences in there that I feel with Bolt that we were very influenced by, like promos. And we would cut it and we would use music that were promo-esque. And the reason that is because the way Usain Bolt is quick, short, sharp bursts of like big energy and like incredibly like engaging small content. So we sort of wanted to fill the long form film structurally as a long form, but the little bits of it you could consume like Usain Bolt is consumed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we would never do that with Class 92 because they're a different kind of people and they're a different it's a different story. And to get them across, you wanted to get into like the Stone Roses, Manchester in the 90s, what that felt like. Whereas with Bolt, he's like of the now, fast paced. You'd see him across social media and different platforms in little bites. So we would try and fill the film up of lots of those little bites. So it felt like a really authentic take on him.
Mm. It's interesting as well. Like you've got films like Class of '92 that just went down a treat, didn't it, box office in terms of the numbers. You've got films like Free Solo, When We Were Kings. What does that do for the genre as well? When certain creations get such highly regarded, don't they, and awarded on such a high level?
I'm absolutely honoured that you put Class 92 in with those other two films. I mean, that's like the most beautiful formulation of a question
ever. Yeah, totally. I mean, he's right. That's just a huge honour to even be mentioned with those names. I think that like we always say that like we can't really tell when it's going to go and when it's not.
I was going to say, yeah. What makes a sports film go that kind of level?
I think there's just a sort of alchemy to it, like timing. There is a huge amount of luck across every part of our industry, getting the breaks in the first time, getting the story that works in the way that needs to for the narrative, being in the right place at the right time, pointing the camera in the right direction when the right moment happens, releasing it on a week where the weather's bad, people are going to the cinema, there's a global pandemic, you know what I mean? There's reasons why stuff work and don't work that cut totally out of your control. I always think with Class 92 that it just flew for some reason. And a lot of that, again, was to do with Beckham. So I remember he went on Jonathan Ross and he held the DVD up. He was just talking about it. And it just so happened that at that time, I think people they wanted that kind of content. And he goes on, eyeballs are on the screen, he holds it up, and people might not have known of it, but it just went. And I remember thinking like, wow, we're in the middle of one that goes, like before that we made In the Hands of the Gods. We thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was in and out of the cinemas over a weekend. And Nike had gone with Old Lionsgate, bought it. We thought like, oh, we made it, we're in Cannes, me and Ben. And, I remember probably the most embarrassing moment of my life. We went to a party and I thought it was a sushi bar, but it was fish you had to choose for them to cook. So I pick up like a fist of salmon, take a bite, like, look at me, Charlie Big Potatoes. And everyone around me looks at me like, are you a Neanderthal? But I remember us thinking like, we've made it, and the film was launched and we were like, this is going to be utterly mind-blowing. And then like, there's an email from everyone being like, tomorrow you're coming out because no one went to see it. And you're like, oh God, we've been reviewed really well. You're thinking it's a game changer. And then with Class of 92, I remember them saying, we want to do this sort of multi-platform release because it's so close to Christmas, we don't want to lose the DVD sales. And I remember me and Ben being like, really, multi-platform? That sounds to me like they don't believe in this theatrically, or like we're going to lose our theatrical window. Maybe like it just looks like a straight to DVD. I remember being a bit cautious about it, and then bang, it just blew up. And I was like, oh wow, well, what do I know? Last time I thought we were going to go, it was going to go mental, and this time I had no idea. So I just think there's just a load of luck out there, and there are loads of amazing films made, and some of them just take off.
But I think something like Class of '92, and I'm thinking of it slipped my mind. There's some of the other, like particularly Sunderland Till I Die, for example, like another one where Tom and I always say that we growing up, all we ever watched in terms of like documentary sport was like Arsenal season review DVDs. And I think that maybe as well, there's a reason why that class of 92 did just rocket, because fans were only used to seeing kind of like that sort of overview of a season, watching the highlights. And that just took it to a whole new level, like showing how a story can unfold, you know?
Well, we were heavily influenced by NFL's America's Game. So every time at the end of the season, their season DVDs, they do the whole season, who wins the Super Bowl, and they go deep because it's an American production, and it was like, and we used to watch the America's Games, and I remember when the Class 92 thing came up, Leo, the producer, was like, because originally we would talk about TV or whatever, and he was like, this is one of those movies. Like, you look at the story, this is, English people, we don't go for the look how great they are naturally. But he was like, look how great they are. If we tell this like an American crew would tell it, it'll go. And then I remember when we got to interview them, it just felt like no one had ever sat Paul Scholes down and gone, all right, mate, what was that all about? Not in a way of like, so when you put that cross in, it was like, we said to him, tell us some stories. And he was like, what do you mean? And we'd be like, well, what was it like being at the cliff and stuff? And he tells that story about putting Nicky Butt in the tumble dryer. And you're like, oh, okay, they had loads of fun. And like, you just would never know that stuff. So it was funny. Anytime you got Scholes on football, he'd sort of be like, oh, okay. But then you asked him about just what it was like being with the guys in and around the cliff and being a footballer at that time, and he'd come to life, because I don't think anyone had ever asked him that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the closeness you get, though, as well. I think it came up when we did the Sunderland Till I Die chat as well, that these sports stars, especially in this day and age of social media, they're put on that pedestal where actually them from their sport, and them as these global superstars, but actually they're normal people, and seeing that behind the scenes stuff potentially is a closeness that you can't get in today, that maybe we used to be able to get with our heroes in yesteryears. You look at some of that behind the scenes footage in The Last Dance, are you getting that close to Michael Jordan, to MJ? Are you mad? Like, yet you're on the coach with him. You're seeing him rip someone else in the team to absolute pieces. And actually you're part of that fun. And again, that band of brothers thing, you feel part of that. And I think that transports you to a different place. And I think you mentioned at the beginning, at the top of the show, Gabe, that actually it's more than just the sport. And actually to tell someone that story, you show them actually that brotherhood. And I think that's the most powerful thing when you watch something like that.
I mean, we just felt very lucky that we were telling a story. We're Sunderland fans, and they battered Newcastle that season. They were heroes in our household. Chased down, how many points was it? And and it was, oh, Keegan, love it if we beat them. Oh, it's just glory. They were heroes to us. Like, we're not United fans, but we're definitely anti-Newcastle fans. So they were. I just absolutely loved that team.
There's been quite a lot of mileage in being Sunderland fans, like, because at the very worst, someone that just laughs at you. But if you've watched football for a lifetime and supported a club like Sunderland, you're not fucking around, in a certain sense. Like, and to have that thing with the United, everyone, there was that when they were at their zenith, everyone hated United. We were like the first people it felt like to be nice to them and say that is incredible. What was it like? And then being Sunderland fans gave us that somehow, like, I don't know. It's quite a good opening pitch.
Well, also, you cling on to. We could make Mark Poon's header against Derby into an entire afternoon of how incredible it is to be a Sunderland fan. So if you're used to dealing with scraps and making and those scraps lasting for a whole night's entertainment, then when you get a treble to deal with, you're like, fill your boots. There's so many highs here. I can just go wild. We're dealing with like Kieran Richardson's free kick, Mark Poon's header. There's about 5 moments over 10-year period that were glorious, and everything else is a complete nightmare.
So Tom and I are now going to hand the baton over to Daniel, who's studying journalism and psychology at Rhodes University in South Africa. Over to you, Daniel.
Okay, so my first question is, did you decide to make this documentary when you did because Bolt's career was going to be coming to an end shortly? Obviously, you made it just before the 2016 Olympics.
Yeah, it was definitely a sense that was a good time to make it in what was going to be probably his final year and going for all those goals at the Olympics. And yeah, the timing definitely played into it. I think for him as well, to have the film made at that time felt good.
Okay, so do you think, like, for him, he was sort of more willing to do it, that he knew that his career was coming to an end rather than in, like, I guess, the peak of his time as a runner?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think he was going for a feat that no one had ever, three in a row. People had done 2 in a row at various different lengths, but no one had really done 3 in a row, particularly not at 2 events. So I think because it was like this big sort of historical moment, coupled with the fact that because he ran for 1 more year, but even he definitely wasn't going to go to another Olympics. So it was his last Olympics, and I think he understood the kind of the scale of it and the importance of it. From my point of view, he is the most magnetic Olympic star for God knows how long, and there's a kind of worry in my mind, because I love athletics and I love the Olympics, but I kind of look at athletics coming into the next Olympics and I'm like, what's it going to be like post Bolt? It's like he became so synonymous with the glory of the Olympics that you kind of fear for the future. So I think that there's obviously was a lot of weight on his shoulders and to go and do great there. And I think that just maybe he was aware that it was his last one, or I'm sure he was aware, but maybe he felt like, marking this historical moment was a good idea. We were just very lucky to be the people that he decided to take there.
Okay, that makes sense. And I mean, I think you raise a good point. He's definitely like the biggest star the athletic scene has seen for a while. And I mean, you mentioned it there. So how do you go about making a documentary like this? Because obviously Bolt, his entourage, and then also like the other people you interviewed, like Serena Williams, Neymar, Pele, they're not exactly accessible people. So like, how do you go about making this documentary and getting access to these people?
Well, I think that Pele, Neymar, Serena, there's a variety of, once you've worked making sports documentaries for a long time, like me and Ben have done, and everyone at Fullwell has done, like you start to know a lot of people, so different agents and different managers of different people, so it's easier to move within the circles. But predominantly those people are doing it for Bolt. So Serena Williams, if you're asking her, you're asking her if she wants to comment on Usain Bolt, and she had been to the Olympics with him in Beijing, and so I think he was a fan of hers, she was a fan of his, so it's a much easier ask than if you say, hey, do you want to do my film, as it were. They're not doing it because of you, they're much more doing it because of Bolt. But I think that in the sports world, it's big, but it actually is quite small in a way. And if you do good work, you get in there and do some good work, generally you build a reputation and it opens doors for you. So you can make any sports doc, and if it's well received and it does well, a lot of that sports community will have consumed it, and then you've got a kind of case to start trying to pitch for bigger, better things. And me and Ben, prior to doing Usain Bolt, had sort of been making sports docs for about 10 years. So we had met a lot of people and done some work that we were super proud of, and it opened some other doors for us. So you start to gain contacts and people's trust, and it enables you to snowball and make bigger things with bigger people, I guess. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but kind of feels like how it is, right, B?
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And then, so with the documentary of this nature, obviously you're spending a lot of time with Usain Bolt in his, well, not personal space, but you're going to his house and all that. So how do you balance getting the footage you need to make your documentary interesting, while at the same time not being too intrusive, and making sure that he feels comfortable living his normal life? Because I'd imagine also you don't want his life to be sort of something that is put on, because otherwise it's not that interesting for the viewers if he is putting on like a facade to look a different way for your cameras.
In a way, the way to get there is to sort of push through it a bit and have him get used to it, rather than be too like tiptoey around. And he's a bit exceptional because he's really comfortable in front of the camera more than most. But with all the people you film with, it's not that you need to be around them all the time, but kind of you're sort of waiting for the moments that happen. You'll shoot a lot and you'll be around them a lot, but a lot of it's not going to be usable. And sometimes in that scenario, you're better off putting the camera away. But the sooner they get used to it, the better. They're more likely to get natural with it by like getting used to you and you finding a way of not being a massive pain in the arse while you're shooting. than to tiptoe around it too much, I think.
Okay, so it's more just like being there enough and making sure they're fine with you being there, and then just pushing through it, and then after
you
that,
sort of
they're
earn
fine.
Yeah, you earn their trust, and you learn to work in a way that is unobtrusive. You know, he told us. I mean, Bolt would told us to stop asking. That we would be at his house. In the end, he was like, "Just set your stuff up at my house and don't call me 7 times a day. Just be with me, and don't keep asking whether you can have water or whatever if I make yourself at home." That was what he was like, but he's not. He's kind of more the exception than the rule, I'd say.
Okay, and then were you there with the film crew for most of the time, like when you were on the ground filming?
Yeah, one of us would almost always be there, but he filmed a lot of stuff himself. We gave him a camera, and a lot of that stuff, like the night before races, where he sort of like can't sleep and he's filming himself. He really took to that. We always felt like, again, we were talking to Andrew and Tom about it earlier, about how we tried to make it feel different and stylistically like the film was his, and that it should feel, when the music and the cutting and the filming, that it's got his stamp on it. So we gave him his own camera because we knew he was quite au fait with like filming himself and getting his personality across. So we gave him a camera and we encouraged him to shoot loads. And he got some really good revealing stuff late at night, you know, when he was thinking about stuff which, when you would go there for an interview, he might be through, and, you know, his mind was elsewhere. And that was really, really helpful. You know, that camera, I think of all the documentaries we've done, we got the best stuff from him, from his own camera, because he was so good at sort of having a feeling and then making sure he'd switch on the camera and tell us about it.
What you want to communicate, what you want to get to with the people you're working with, is that they have some ownership themselves. So it's his film, he's going to be the one who's in it. So ultimately, the better it is, the better it reflects on him. And when you slightly blurred lines, because in a way you have to be a bit more dispassionate in the edit, and you're always balancing a bit up, like I hope they're going to be happy with it. But ultimately, you're all the more he was like, it's my film, so I'm going to get the best moments for you, and that's really where you want to be.
It actually leads quite nicely to my one question, because I was going to ask you whether you having himself, I didn't realize you made the decision that he was going to film himself. So I was going to ask, was that a decision at the beginning where you knew and you wanted him to be filming his own personal stuff in like a first person sense alongside your more normal interview documentary sort of filming?
Yeah, it was a decision very early on. I mean, we do it a lot of the time, but we were particularly keen to do it with him because of who he was and what we thought we would get from him. And that was one of the best decisions we made, was to get him to shoot as much as possible, because he shot some brilliant stuff in the film, and it was really revealing as to who he was.
And we'd all often be like, Jesus Christ, he's put it on Instagram. You know what I mean? He's like, I think the Instagram version of this film is better than the one we're making at certain moments in it.
Text him, please take this down now. Please, you saying we need this footage. It's golden.
Or you do like an interview with him and you talk. You'd spend like an hour or two talking to him about something that's happened, and he'd really get to a thought in his head. That's kind of like when it's most interesting. You're talking about a race, or he gets to something in his mind that he like come to understand something a bit differently. And then he like says it in an interview to someone else like 2 minutes later, puts it on Instagram. We're like, dude, come on, that's like.
We used to have a saying with him whenever we sat down and interviewed him. It was called "Not Sky Sports, not Sky Sports News." So he'd be like, we'd sit down and we'd have a list, and we'd say, look, we're going to ask you a few questions. I don't care what you say. In fact, we don't even need to ask you questions. Just whatever you say back to us cannot be something you would have said on Sky Sports News, because there's that kind of like guarded tone where you get good information, but it feels like you're in an interview on a sports channel.
And then they regurgitate it. Yeah, 100
we're like, whatever you say, it doesn't even need to be about sport, but just make it not feel like Sky Sports News. So we had that joke like with him out. So we would always tell him, like, if he's going to give us an interview, he can't just go, it's a game of two halves, you know.
How invested did you get in him? And obviously, when that 2016 Olympics rolls around, you probably, the world wants him to win anyway, because it's 3 in a row and it's Usain Bolt. But like, suddenly, are you watching Sunderland in a cup final? Like, were you desperate? Like, I want Usain Bolt to win because I'm a Usain Bolt fan and I love the Olympics. But if he didn't win that final, I probably wouldn't have cared. Like, I don't care. Whereas you two, were you like invested by that point?
It was Sunderland in a final, but for one thing, which is that when Sunderland are in a final, you walk away devastated. When Usain Bolt's in a final, you walk away victorious. And it's that simple. So yes, the feelings of caring as much were there, but the difference was me and Ben walked away like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
He won.
This is strange.
I remember saying to him, I'll see you on the other side. And he looked at me, he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, oh, it's like a saying. He's like, yeah, but it sounds like you're worried. And I'm like, no, it's just a set. And then in my head, I was like, yeah, of course I'm worried. I'm a Sunderland fan. Like, we always lose everything, even if we should win. And in his head, he was like, yeah, because, you know, like, I don't know what you're worried about.
I remember we were standing there in the stadium and we looked at each other and Gabe, you went, he's got this, right? I was like, I think he thinks he's got this. He knows he's got this.
Yeah.
And he's got it.
Because I was like, no way, we're here. If we're in his corner, it effectively means he's going to lose. Because like
his luck is more powerful than our bad. His good luck was more powerful than our bad luck. And our bad luck is pretty powerful in the world of sport.
Brilliant. Daniel, do you have any other questions for the guys?
I just got one more and then I'll be done. More like a process question. So when you are going about this, especially with your final edits and putting the thing together, how much are you working with the athletes and their team to just make sure that the narrative, I guess, that they want and they're happy, and making sure that they're happy with it? Like, how involved are they in your final editing process?
The way we like to work is to show it to them at the end. But part of that, I think, is getting to know them properly. You know where their head's at with the film. But you want to show them how you deal with issues rather than talk about it too much in the first instance. Because there are things, the way you say anything is as important as what you're saying. We always try and sort of try and tell the story from the point of view of our character. So if we're successful with that, it shouldn't be too much of a problem what the subject matter is, if that makes sense. And we want to understand what their personalities are. We want to make a film that fits them. But you have to wait to the right point in the process to really achieve that, I think, for them to see it. But sometimes you have to have a conversation. Like, I'm going to call it an art. You don't agree on everything. They can't. You need to have editorial control over it, and you need to tell that story in the way that you think is right, truthful.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, just once you've got it all together, then you show them. They're not really involved in the process. Yeah. Okay. But
I do say to them when I'm shooting, I'll be like I will say to people I'm shooting with, I would rather you said it and afterwards said I'm a bit concerned about that than like self-censor on the way in. So like, it's not quite take it or leave it at the end. Because, when you're filming, if someone's ever pointed a camera in your direction, you're like, oh my God, they're fucking filming. And then you're a bit self-conscious about it. And oh God, should I say that? Am I say? And you can outthink what you should or shouldn't say in there. And that can wreak havoc a bit. And one of the ways of building trust is to be able to say to someone, look, just if you want to say it, say it. Don't worry about it. I'd rather you didn't worry about it, but you felt that you could say to me, I'm not happy about that. Please don't use it. Than you were self-censoring. Because they get to know you. If they can trust you, when they know they can trust you, as I say, you can cut the most innocent scene to make someone look like a massive knob, and you can cut like a massive knob scene and make them seem like fine. So like their power's kind of in your hands, irrespective of it. And they need to trust you. They know that, and they need to trust you. So that this is a strange equation.
We just wanted to, Gabe, before we wrap, as it's your first appearance, we're going to give you the same counter-attack challenge that we gave Ben. If that's all right.
Big last five, Gabe. Big last five.
Well, I don't know what that is, but I'm in.
Well, it's just some rapid questions. Which you can field away. So I don't know, Tim, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, let's kick off with best sports documentary ever.
When We Were Kings.
Favorite show to binge at home that's not a sports documentary. So favorite Netflix show or Amazon show.
Oh, current or historical? Current.
Either or.
Current, Ted Lasso.
Nice.
Best Sunderland player ever.
So best or favorite?
Well, recently I've been remembering how good Kevin Phillips was, because I would have said Claudio Reyna a while back, but he was only there for a bit, and Phillips was just. I was watching some of his stuff the other day, as you do. I think it's
as you do, as everyone does. They sit down and go, "How am I going to spend my day?" It's watching YouTube clips of Kevin Phillips.
Super Kev. I watched. It's got to be Super Kev. Yeah. I mean, I love Julio Arca. There's players I love, but Super Kev's the one. I love Super Kev.
Quinn Phillips, big man, little man. It's legendary.
Mate, when Phillips was a European Golden Boot winner at Sunderland.
There hasn't been a better partnership since.
No, unbelievable, iconic. Messi or Ronaldo?
Oh,
come on, Gabe! It's not a debate. Come on.
Oh, it is a debate.
We're very firm believers over here.
They didn't like my answer when I did it. I had to defend the hill.
Very big debate.
Ben, you're lucky. You're lucky you got invited back on after your one.
Ben would have said Messi, but I'm going to say Ronaldo.
No, I said Ronaldo, dude.
Oh.
Listen, I know everyone, poet-wise, everyone goes Messi, but just from I don't like the fact that it's Ronaldo, because Messi's the most beautiful player that's ever played the game.
Exactly.
You're not asking me who the most beautiful player that ever played the game is.
Yeah.
You're asking me who the best player that ever played the game. Ronaldo's the guy. He's done it in multiple teams. He's done it he's insane. But if you ask me the most beautiful player that's ever played the game, it's Diego Maradona.
Yeah, I think that I hear the argument. There's a difference between greatest and best. For me, best is at their very best for 20 minutes, whatever. Who is the most perfect footballer that's ever lived? And for me, that's a different
question. The answer is Messi.
Also, Zidane was so amazing. It's so easy to forget how that guy was just. That guy was.
The one thing you should know about us, right? We had a Josep Guardiola shirt in his Barcelona days, a Guardiola 4 shirt, and me and Ben used to go around telling people that Guardiola was one of the greatest players of all time, because he was that's where I used to play sitting on the back 4. Ben introduced me to Guardiola, and it's just post Desai. Desai was the first that did it, and then Guardiola kind of mastered it. So people like that. I think you asked me historically. I was very affected by Guardiola, the player.
I think any greatest player debate, it's a toss-up, isn't it? Really, Zidane, Kevin Phillips.
They're all up there. They're all up there.
Ronaldinho.
If you're asking me for 20 minutes on their best day, Lorik Sana at Sunderland was unbelievable. Unbelievable. You ask any Sunderland fan, but Lorik Sana for about 2 months was
a baller.
I've never seen anything like it. I think he won man of the match every week for 8 weeks.
Next documentary that's been announced there, right there. We've got 2 questions left. We're sidetracked. Go for it, Tim.
Yeah, right. So we've got one of our favourites, Sunderland to win the Premier League or England to win the World Cup.
Sunderland to win the Premier League.
Yeah, fair. And finally, from the world of sport, dead or alive, 4 dinner guests around to yours for a takeaway. Who do you want there to chew the fat with?
Jordan, Tiger. It would have been Jordan, Tiger, Maradona, and Socrates.
What the Arsenal centre back or?
No, 82 Brazil.
Yeah. Oh, that one. It could have been either. Before we close, I just want to say, what's up next for you both? Is there anything that viewers should be really excited about in the pipeline for Full Well 73?
There's about to be a bunch of announcements that we can't not allowed to talk about.
So what we need to do is just take care and listen out for the announcements.
Never allowed to. We're never allowed to say anything.
Okay.
I think what you could say is I'm starting a campaign to get Tiger to tell his own story, and I want to do it.
Well, you never. Tiger might listen. Someone always said,
"Get this to Tiger," because that's what I really want to do.
Eldrick, if you're listening, just
let us shoot an interview with you. We'll do the rest.
Yeah, he doesn't reply to my Instagram DMs.
I don't understand why that is.
I'll tell you what, Gabe. Actually, you've matched Ben's debut performance. I'm very impressed. Well done.
Thank you very much. But you know the answer to that Ronaldo Messi question. You just don't want to accept it. Everyone knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, I was going to say you got
Messi's the beautiful. Ronaldo's the functional.
We're
But
gonna
if you're
have to
asking who's better, Ronaldo's the one.
We're gonna
No,
have to
so,
rejig
so I
that
think
question.
better means best, but greatest could mean Ronaldo, because the greatest is just a collection of everything, whereas best is like at their best, who's better for me. So it's like Tiger.
Sorry. Scratch all of that. If you're asking me the best for 20 minutes ever in anything, I would actually say ahead of Maradona was original Ronaldo.
Well,
In his peak, I have never seen anything like that.
Scary.
This could go on all night, chaps, couldn't it?
I'm re-looking. I don't think Socrates would be at my table. It'd be Jordan, Tiger, Maradona, and I need to think more about the last one.
Yeah, you can't have any.
Because you'd probably go for like a Jesse Owens, someone like important. Not that Socrates wasn't, but
you could tell everyone that Jack Nicklaus is greater than Tiger Woods, and that might spike Tiger to coming on. You've been a bit like Jordan, I took that personally. Tiger might be like, do you know what? I really need to do the doc to show the Turners that I'm the greatest.
Possibly. I mean, if there were any way of provoking him, I would try it. Into doing it, I would try it.
I was going to say all these guests aren't meeting COVID restrictions, though, Gabe. So you'd have to be a bit careful, wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
right.
yeah.
Both. It's been an absolute pleasure. A fantastic chat. So we've really enjoyed it.
I've got a feeling we've found the new Gary and Phil Neville of HTO, the brothers link up.
Well.
There you go. Oh, actually, it'd be. I've changed my mind again on the Who Ran 10, but I'll save it for next time. But I have changed my mind.
You just tell us, who is it? You can't do that.
I'd quite like Martina Navratilova to be there.
Nice.
I just think Martina Navratilova, when we were growing up, I remember her like being Herculean, like just the greatest.
Surely you'd have Vince Lombardi.
Well, Vince Lombardi, maybe Vince. There's loads. You know what I mean?
There's a good sports documentary there for Navratilova, chaps.
Yeah. I think the Lombardi one. Yeah, Navratilova would be phenomenal.
But I just think when I was growing up, she was like untouchable. So
yeah, phenomenal.
No, just to echo what Tom said, really fantastic, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
great to do it.
No, take care.
See you in a bit.
Bye, man. Peace out.
See you later.
Bye.
See you later.
Really fascinating to just sort of hear a bit more about creating sports documentaries. I've really enjoyed our deep dives on certain films, but actually to hear from two guys at the top of the game, actually the thought process they go through was actually quite fascinating to get that different take.
Definitely, and also like the kind of the whole family background and history, that was quite fun to delve into as well. Really, how the whole passion derived really, and obviously great to have Daniel on the show as well.
Yeah, another opportunity for our students. So anyone else listening is sort of student interested in sports journalism, film creation, please do get in contact. We do try and offer opportunities to come on the pod and just ask our guest a few questions. We obviously can't offer it for everyone. It's limited, but nonetheless, put your name in the hat. We draw them at random and we give the students that opportunity. So more than welcome on our next one. Looking forward to our next one after that chat as well. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So again, guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. You can find out all details about all we're doing at HTO on Twitter and YouTube, Facebook, Instagram at HTO Football. You can find us there. Have a good week and see you next time.